So in this video, what we're going to do is do a full stack application. And it's probably best if we start with the back end and work our way forward. And this isn't just a strategy for installations, but also if you ever get stuff or applications or legacy software that you have to work with on a team, one of the strategies is either start from the beginning of the application so you could weave your way through, or you start where the data is and work your way backwards. So kind of in the spirit of that, we're going to start with these installs here. So I'm right here on PostgreSQL.org, and I'm doing this for Windows right here. So I'm going to click download the installer. And I have all these versions right here. You could go through all these if you want to. I am doing this for Windows. So I'm going to click this button. And then now my download should begin. And then I'm going to do a cut here in just a moment and show you what it's like to go through the installer. So now that I have this up right here, this is what you should roughly see. And if this is a future version and it looks slightly different, just try and eyeball it the best you can. Because, software and UI changes. But it should be the similar process. So we're going to click next and choose your directory. I've already installed this like a million times going through this and getting the steps down. But it should already create this here for you. You're going to click next. And you're going to go through, and I don't need, let's see, is it going to let me unclick this? Sometimes it doesn't. Okay, sweet. I know I don't need the stack builder. I just need pgadmin. And then I guess command line tools. I'm not going to do anything with it, but I know specifically I don't need the stack builder. So we're going to keep going. And then this is the directory where the data is going to be stored. So it's still going to be in the PostgreSQL. It's going to be like a subfolder. And then we have all of this right here. Keep note that this is important right here. We have the database port 5432. This is going to be very important when we set up the API, just because you're going to want to know where the database is. So we're going to go ahead and click next. And then we're going to let it install. And so you may get this, it may be shut down, it may be running. Just make sure it's not running at all. I've already uninstalled this software, so it should be good. So if you get this prompt, it may not, it's just a warning. It's not an error. So now that this is finished up here, it says setup has finished installing PostgreSQL on your computer. So we're going to click finish. And so we should be good. So what I'm going to do now is come into here and type in pgadmin4. And this is going to be the UI you're going to use to interact with your database. Now keep in mind, when you go into the corporate sphere, you may have a local database, which is a mirror of what you use in production. So, all the data that actually exists for customers, you're going to be able to see, but you're not necessarily going to have all that information locally. So the database may be owned under someone else's team, but you could still access it using pgadmin. So it's loading off on another screen right now. I'm going to drag it over when it fully loads. And let's see if I can bring this over. So I think this already got set during my initial run. And so if you're watching this for the first time and you're kind of confused or whatever, always write down your password. So mine's going to be root, ROOT, for everything, because it's local. I don't care. I'm just doing this stuff for examples. So I'm going to come here and type ROOT. If yours is more complex for whatever reason you want it to be, write it down. Please just write it down. Otherwise, there's going to be some issues, right? So we're going to click that. We're going to come down into here. And you see there's some other install stuff that's here, but I specifically selected the PostgreSQL 14 because I think it should say on that screen, maybe not, but I just selected the most recent version. So 14 is higher than 10, so I'm going with this. I'm going to drop down. It's asking me for my password again. I'm going to hit or type in root, create, or great. So now what do? We have databases. We're going to drop this down, and we see we have this demo users right here. Well, where did this come from? Well, I've already made this database. So I'm going to show you in a second how to make another database or one that's similar. But where do I see the table or tables or wherever I'm going to do my stuff? Well, you're going to click on schemas right here. Public, you see you could do a lot with databases, right? But what we care about is this tables right here. We're going to drop this down and we see user info. All right, so we can see the properties of this thing. If we wanted to, there's a dashboard with info if it's important to us. And then here's actually interesting. If we click on SQL, we could have this create table if not exists. And so if you're doing group work, this is a great way if someone makes a table and you all need to replicate it on your ends. This is a great way to take that information and share it amongst the group if you wanted to do it that way. But how do we do a query? So let's come in here and use the query tool. And let's just do a select all. And the table is user info. So I'm going to do user underscore info. And you're going to probably laugh at some of the information I already have on here. Oh, we already have just one, and then Bernie. So this is an ID that auto increments itself. And that's just the way it was set up in the database. And then we have the age, which is a column that I made because we could click here on columns and we can see ID, age, and name. And so if we click on, I don't think it'll do anything interesting there, but we see age right here. We see the data type is an integer. We could probably change it up here if we wanted to, but we're leaving it as an integer. If we wanted to go into age or ID, I should say, we could click on properties. Definition is an integer. We could see if there's any constraints about it. We could look at some more information if we want to. And so that's how you download PostgreSQL. This is how we get the pgadmin going. But what if I wanted to make a new table? Well, I could come in here and do create, and I could do it this way. And you could do it with a create statement as well. But what if I wanted to come in here and use this? So let's name this, delete me. It's kind of Pythonic the way you write these database names. So delete underscore me, all lowercase, just so it's a convention, right? So it's not like you have a, capital E in the middle of it. That doesn't make any sense. So we have this right here. And let's go ahead and we're going to add a row. And so let's give, I don't know. Let's do a name of first name. Let's select a data type in here. And they may be slightly different than maybe what you're used to in some languages because you have a lot of choices as you see here. So let's go to character, which is you could think of as like a string. And so not null, meaning there has to be something here. And let's give this, make this the primary key because you're going to want a primary key to, if you have multiple tables that use, some ID or something like that, you're going to want something to query on or join tables on or whatnot. This is just a BS example. So it doesn't really, matter a whole lot. So we're going to click save right here. And now we have this delete me table. And if I'm to click on the properties, we could see this right here. We have these columns. And if we wanted to, we could start doing insert statements into this table to then start producing the data. But I could also right click on this thing right here and I could delete and drop it. So that way I could do everything within the UI here. And so what I'm going to focus on specifically is just this table right here, user info. You can name yours whatever you want to. And then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to start building out the API and I'm going to show you how to connect to this table right here locally on your machine. And then from there, hopefully you're able to then for your projects, whatever it is you do, create the databases you need, construct those, and you're going to see kind of the rhythm and flow of how you tell another piece of software where some information is and how we could start manipulating some of the info here. So I'll see y'all in just a moment. Okay, so now that we have our database set up here, And I apologize for the way my throat sounds. I've had this nonstop cough for like 5 years now and it won't go away. But I have select all from user info in here. And I was just throwing random data in here. I was actually experimenting with something else. And so that's why you have like, I don't know, some odd data in here. But nonetheless, I follow the ID, age, and name, schema here. So don't forget too that, my passwords are root and root. Yours may be root and Postgres or whatever it is you name these. So be sure to write them down. But what we're going to do now is, since we have this database running and the server is up for this, the next logical thing we want to do, moving from the back, so the database, to the middle ground now, is work on the API. And an API is just a piece of software. So typically we've done a lot of stuff with UI. There's buttons, layouts, you could resize screens, do all that cool stuff. But now we could think of software, we could think of functionality and stuff that we need, but it doesn't necessarily need a UI, right? And so we're going to build a piece of software out in not very many lines, and we're going to put it on a server. So that way we could send information to it over the network and say, hey, give me all of the info in here, or maybe add something to it, or delete something, or change something in here. So how are we going to do this? What are our steps? And so let me drag this over from my other screen here. And so this is a little big. Let me resize this. And so the first thing we're going to do, and I've already have this installed, is you're going to want to download Node. So this is basically, Node is, what it says up here, is a JavaScript runtime built on Chrome's V8 JavaScript engine. And so just download the LTS one right here, long-term support, recommended for most users. I love they have that labeled. And then once that is installed, you could then go and start building node-based projects. So once you have this step downloaded, the next thing we're going to do is go to here and Express. And this is what we're going to use to start building out our API. And so it's a fast, unopinionated, minimalist web framework for Node.js. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to copy this. We're going to come into here. We are in our terminal here. You could, use this to split or get a new terminal. I just use the shorthand, which is, I think, Control tilde. We're going to paste that in, and then we're going to hit enter. And so we see that, we did this right here, and, it looked like something happened, but there's nothing in here. And so this could be a bit of a problem, right? And so sometimes what you, maybe something will install, but sometimes you won't. And so let's come into here and find a way of getting around this issue. So let's do a package.json, and we're going to keep that here. And what we're going to do is hit save. And all we have in here is an open and closing, an open and closing curly bracket here. And so let's go ahead and try this again. And this was just to show you some debugging. And so now it finds it here. So now we have this Express installed version 4.17.3. And so any dependencies, any of those npm commands that are similar to this you run will be visible in here. We have the package lock, which is basically all the dependencies and things that Express needs. And if you want to see everything you've downloaded so far, you could go into node modules, which is just a way of saying other people's projects that are needed minimally for, in this case, Express. But you could have a laundry list of dependencies in here. So now that we have that, there are some other things that we're going to need. Another is this for cores. This is something I like to use because when we get to a point where we're sending information between the browser and the API that we're building, sometimes like Chrome or Firefox, whatever it is you may use, doesn't like that. And so this package, and I'll show you how to use it, helps get around those kinds of issues there. So let's go ahead and do this. All right, we see that we have cores installed, so that's pretty cool right there. And then let's come in, and this is for PG, for Node Postgres. It's a non-blocking PostgreSQL client for Node.js. And this is going to be, well, this is going to allow us to connect easily to our database. So we're going to come in here. And then now you see that we have cores, Express, and then PG for Postgres installed. So we should be able to go now. So what's the next thing that we truly need to do, right? And so what we're first going to do is minimally set up our server. That's it. And then what we're going to come through and do is set up our database, or not our database. We're going to set up the thing that will connect to our database, the code essentially. So let's do this. We'll do index.js. And so what we're going to start doing then is setting up the server. But first we need to bring in some of the stuff that we have, downloaded. And so we'll start with this. And so I do have PG. I don't know why. Oh yeah, it's requesting stuff I don't have or didn't download. But these are what we're going to start off with for now. And so we have these require in here, which is another way of saying import. I believe in one of the previous lessons, I've shown you how to export, import, certain kinds of files, objects, whatever it is you need. And so this may just be another flavor in your eyes of doing the exact same thing. Because remember, in coding, there's a lot of ways to solve the same problem. And then at times more than one syntax to do the same thing upon your preference. So now that we have this, let's go ahead and start building up our application here. So now we have const app. An app is what we're going to start using, and you'll see in a moment here, it's going to be our Express app in general, and this is what we're going to use to create our endpoints. So the thing that we could think of constructs the address that we have to go to either receive or change or delete information. And the port is just what it's running on. If you remember from our, let me bring this up here. This is running on 5432. And so what's cool about this is it's, port 3000 here. We could change it to 3001 if we wanted to. If there's a conflict and you already have something running on your computer, you could just change this dynamically if you wanted to, and everything should be good. So let's come in here and let's just do some of this stuff here. Okie dokie. So we have this stuff here, and we have the body parser. So we're going to be breaking things down in JSON. We have cores, and then we have the body parser .url encoded. The cores is probably like the least, right now useful one to you. And actually, let me see if I remember the commands. There we go. I'll keep the body parser stuff together here. But this is just more boilerplate that I have to help me, organize, keep going. And yeah, so the next thing we want to do is we want to set up our root of our API. So we have this right here. I'm going to scroll up here. So we have this root of the API. And what does this mean? It's kind of like the home address of where all our commands are going to start going from. If you don't have a root, if I remember right, Spring Boot, which is something very similar to Express, but it's in Java, I believe throws a hissy fit if you don't have like a root, kind of address set up. So we will need that for this I've already typed some of this stuff out on my own, so if you're wondering how some of this is appearing, it's because I've written this more than one time in Visual Studio Code, so it knows where I'm going. So we have this set up right here, and it's giving me, oh, it's probably because, there we go. Let's see. Oh, it looks like it added some extra stuff there for me. All right, so that should work now. Sometimes when, that's one thing I always say is that in the IntelliSense, autocomplete's cool, but then when, sometimes it just throws a little bit much out there for you. And so what we're going to do next is we're going to come down here. It's not what I wanted. We want to start the server because this alone is not enough. If we were to run this file, nothing would happen, or maybe something would happen, but not what we want. So how do we do that? Just like app.get, we're going to have app.listen. And Indeed still knows what I want here. So I have the app, and we have .listen, and then we have the port. We have this callback function occurring in here, and this is just going to be logging out in here when it runs. So how do we get it to run? We're going to come in here and do this. Node index.js. We hit enter. We see that we are getting an error in here. Now, what does the error say? It says unhandled error. So it says something is already in use, which is true. I actually have my server up often on another screen because I always keep my code on the other screen. So if you get an error, it will look like this, right? And it says, you know, address already in use. So let me come in here and try this again. Now it says that the app is running on 3000. So how do I check this? Let me come in here and I'll do localhost 3000. And it says cannot read property of get. So clearly we've made a mistake somewhere. So let's go check this out. And you see that in churn, we did hit what we needed to here, but something blew up. So let's go and look through this error and see what happened. And my scroll does a little bit much here. So let's back up here. And it says cannot read property of get undefined. So what am I doing wrong? So if we're looking up here, we have express. We have this response up here. And I think this may have been something that was added in that is a little bit strange in my opinion. So let's come and save, because once again, autocomplete sometimes adds stuff in that is really, truly not necessary. And so now that we have this going up here, let's go ahead and run this again. We're going to hit Control C. We're going to hit type in node index.js, or you could just hit up on your keypad. The app is running again. Let's try this. And now we see response is not defined. So it's a new error and it's moving us forward. Some may think, oh, it's an error again, that sucks. But no, this could be a good lesson of when you see a new error, that means most likely you solved the previous one, or you're at least untying the knot a little bit. So if we look down here, there's a lot of gibberish that doesn't make sense. So it's running, but it says response is not defined. And so we see this right here. And this is interesting because we have res here and response right here. And this is also another issue to show you that autocomplete could get you in a lot of trouble. So if I came in here, did res, did Control C, came up, ran this again, it's running. Now we get that output. And this is going to start getting kind of difficult because as you have this actually connect to the database and then UI actually connect to this, you can see how many more places you're going to start having to look to see where something, blew up at. And so always keep that in mind, that as you go through your areas, you want to make sure as you set stuff up, you have done your due diligence of making sure stuff is connected and works before you start adding more complexity to it by a UI or just other pieces of code. But we truly see here that we are getting information back, and we can see it's in the form of JSON right here, which is really cool. And it's exactly what we have typed out. Info, you could have typed anything in here if you wanted to. And we are now sending this on back, which I think is super cool. That's a lot of fun. So now that we have our kind of home set up right here, so what are our CRUD operations? It's our create, read, update, and delete. And so how are we going to do this or think of these? And it's quite easy. Let's actually create a separate file because we want to stay organized. And there's many other ways when you're making an API you could stay organized. But I'm going to kind of keep everything in 2 files. So that way we could see the, just 2 files we're jumping between, since this is a introduction to APIs and, well, just web in general. So I'm going to create a new file. Hopefully I spelled that right. Queries.js. I feel that is correct here. And so we have this. We have const pool is what we're going to call it. That's typically what I've seen. We're going to do require pg.pool. And this is just the boilerplate, the way I've seen it get set up. So if you're asking me what is going on in here, I don't have the answer to everything, and you don't either. Sometimes when you look at documentation, how others have done it, it's nice to know at times, but other times there's just boilerplate stuff you have to have set up. So the next thing we're going to do is actually create our setup to connect to the database. So we're already doing that. So we're making this new object here, and we have to give it some data. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this over from my other screen to save some time. And let's see here. So we have the user. There's Postgres right here. Your user may be different. It all, really sincerely depends. We have localhost for our, host, and obviously it's running locally, so it's going to be localhost. Our database is going to be demo_users. Our password, which I set is root. Yours may be Postgres and maybe root. It may be whatever you set it as. And then our port is 5432 because it needs to know where on localhost it's going to go look. Where's the database, server saying, hey, I got something going on, right? You need all these pieces, but always know what port something is running on, right? So the next thing I'm going to do is what I want to do is, let's say, so we've already seen how to get the general information from right here, just a generic thing. We're not even pulling from the database. So let's just start pulling from the database. We're going to do a get all. So we're going to do a couple of these things here. We're going to do a const get users and request response. And let me see if this looks correct to me. This looks pretty correct. All right. So we have this right here. And if you notice, this is just a fat arrow function. Back in the JavaScript section, I believe I showed you this. And so this is going to contain all of this functionality, lines 14 through 18 here. And what's happening is I'm doing a pool. And since I'm being connected to Postgres, it's .query. So it's tipping you off there that this object, this pool object, is going to have a query method on it. And it's going to take some arguments in. The first one is select all from users, order by ID ascending. Now you don't have to order by ID ascending. You could just do select all from users and everyone should be happy. But this is a string representation of the SQL that you're going to need to use to get information from your table. Now, if you have multiple tables, more extensive queries, you may want to save these strings off in a separate file, separate folder elsewhere. That would be useful. But for right now, I think we're all okay just writing the short, tiny queries we need just inline right here. And then the second part is this callback here where we have an error in results. So if there's an error, we want to throw it, right? And then we have this response. And then what's going on here is that we're going to take the response, we're going to say the status is 200, and then we're going to take the results from this query, and we're going to give the rows back. And once again, how did I figure this out? How do I know? I just looked at online, seen what other people have done, read articles, looked at APIs, stuff like that, right? And that's kind of the great thing about programming is you don't have to know everything to a fine detail, but once you get a general idea of how to do some of these things, there's nothing wrong with copying and pasting as long as you know generally how this stuff is working, right? So we have this, but it's not entirely useful to us yet. And why is that? Well, we have to export it. So we have module exports, get users. I'm going to leave that comma shouldn't bother anything. I'm used to seeing commas with nothing afterward anyways. So we're exporting it. So then how do we use it? Well, let's come into here now that we have this. And I just like to break this stuff up. Because if you just have like a million requires coming on in, I just don't think it does anyone justice and it's easier to organize. So now we have require and queries. So we have this database, variable here, and it's bringing in get users. And as you can see, as we do other stuff, other queries, we're going to continue to export those. And then we're going to have access to them in this DB constant here. So how do we start to use this? Well, let's come in here and we're going to do app.get. And then let's do this because it knows what I want. And so this is app.get/users. And then we have our database constant we brought in from above, get users, which is this right here. Easy as pie. So since I don't have a package where when you save it, like restarts everything, you're going to have to shut this off and then restart it to have the new features. So in theory, and this may break and we'll figure out why if it does, but in theory, I should be able to go to /users and get all my users now. So let's go ahead and do this. And it says it can't be reached. And let's look for an error. It says users does not exist. So let me look at this right here. Users, so this is important right here. It says it doesn't exist. Well, let's go to the database here. And this is an issue that I've had sometimes because on my Mac and on my Windows, and I believe I resolved it on my Mac. There are two tables that I've made separately. So this is actually user info. And I think on my Mac I had users, but then I added user info. So this is a good example too. I asked for the wrong table. So let's go to user_info here and actually use the right table. That sounds good to me. We're going to start it up again. Come back into here. Hit enter. Now we see all that info come in. So not only do we have a helpful, few things blow up on us so far, but now we get an array back. So notice this is an array because of the, firm, not squiggly brackets, right? But now we have inside here a list of objects coming back with all of the info in the database that I've set. And obviously these are JSON objects because they're key value pair. But how cool is that, right? I've now made a successful connection to my database. That should be very empowering because now it should be pretty easy to, set up the rest, which I'm going to do in just a moment. I just have a drink of water. I'll see y'all in a couple seconds. All right, so there's no guarantee I won't break into a weird coughing fit, but I will edit all those out. So if there's just weird gaps in my speech, it's probably that. But we have done the get all. You see that it works, which is interesting because one thing that you should think of when you're using a browser is this is essentially software that makes get calls, those kinds of requests, right? It wants information when it goes to Amazon.com or superawesomebarbecueplace.com, right? So when we get to stuff like post and delete, we can't really test that in here. So this is just a nice glorified way to use the get commands. So let's come back into here. We have a get all, but what if we want something very specific? We're going to go in here and type get specific user. And to save time, because I'm just a fan of that, we kind of see the flow here. We're going to come in here, going to save it so it formats, and we're going to get a specific user now. So it's the same flow as above. We have this const, we have this request, and then we have the response. And then what's going to happen is the ID, where we're going to pull in from the request params, which is essentially request params, as we can think of as the URL up here. It's going to pull it in. It's going to look it for the ID. And then we have our query here. Select all from user info, where ID equals, put a little space there. And this $1, well, that's really weird. What the hell is that? And this is just a way of formatting the string so we could have variables come on in. And so we have this $1, and then we have this array. And you'll see in other cases where we have $1, and there's a $3 here. And it's a way of just denoting like what values are being plugged in here. So we have this array right here, and all we care about is ID because we just want to find something by an ID, right? And once again, if there's an error, we throw the error. And then we have this response.status.json. And it's really important that you have this because the call may be good, but if your API sends nothing back to, say, the browser or whatever else may be calling it, an error will occur because software only waits for so long, right? So you definitely want to send back this. And a 200 means everything went great. So once again, let's shut this down with Control-C, do node index.js, and wait. This isn't going to work, right? Don't get too excited there. We have to come in here now and do get user because we have to export it. So then we come in here, right? And then how does this look? Well, we have this, but we could do get user. Well, that's kind of weird. Get user, but how does this work, right? We have users, it gets everything. So how do we denote this? /:ID. And so this colon means that there's going to be a variable coming in. There's going to be something we are specifically putting in to the URL that's going to be plucked out. And it's going to be plucked out right here on parseInt request params.id. So this has a direct correlation to this right here. So now that we have all this, let's save. Now that we have that, we're going to fire this off again. So let's go to users and let's go look for the first one, which should be Bernie. That's not what I wanted. There we go. And we see that, in fact, we get an array back. And then we have this object on the inside, and it's Bernie. What if I wanted to go to the third thing in my database? And I have an imaginary dog that I want. Actually, I want another Havanese, but my apartment won't handle another dog. And I want to name him or her Churro. I don't know why. But we see we get that information coming back. And this is all from the database right here, which is super cool. So we have our get operations right here. We have the get all, we have get a specific user. But what if we want to come in and we want to create a user? So let's come in here, create a user. And once again, I'm going to copy and paste my code from another screen in here, and we're going to discuss it, save it. And so we have this thing in here. We have a request body. And so this is different than above. Up here, we had request params ID. And so we're pulling it out of this URL here to use this 3. We're going to use it. But what's this body? And I'll show you in just a minute. But you can see I'm logging some stuff out here to show that we actually got it on in. And so then we have this pool.query. We have insert into user info, ID, age, name, values 1, 2, 3. And so once again, these are the 3 variables coming on in that we're going to give to it. And they're in an array right here with ID, age, and name. So, all right, that's pretty cool. Everything else is cookie cutter right here for how we're sending this information back. So how do we guarantee that this works? So one place I want to show y'all is this. Postman. You could come in here and you could download this. You don't have to set up an account or anything. But this is a way of testing APIs. And not just testing, I guess you could say, but getting information back, using them without having to build out a UI. They made this all here for you. And it may look a little intimidating, and there's probably a million things I don't know how to do with this. But what we can do is, I already have this set up. And so let me come on over here. So let me come into here. So I have this post call. And let's look at how we're going to set this up. So we're going to first export, create user. So we're going to do that right there. And then I'm going to put a little space in here just so it's easier to read. And then we're going to make a post call, which means we're giving something. We're providing some form of information. And so we have this users right here, which you may think, well, these two are near identical, right? At least these addresses, like, how does it know? And that's because Postman, and then when we get to our UI and whatnot, there is a difference. When it gets the information, it'll say, okay, give me something. And the post means, oh, I'm receiving something. And it will know based upon, these differences here, whether you're asking for something back or you're wanting to actually store something. So if these are the same, don't even worry about it, right? So as we look at this, we have once again, there's a lot of things in here that I don't know how to use because I've never had to use this at a very deep level. But you're just going to come in here, you could hit plus to add something. We're going to go to our post. This is the address, right? Localhost. The port is 3000, which I specified, /users. You could have all of the, stuff you want to use in here. I have it set to post. And so I have the key here. The content type is going to be application /JSON, which is what we're sending on in. And then we have the body. And we have ID 5 right here. Let me make sure it's not already taken. So we do not have an ID of 5 right here, which is good. So it doesn't exist yet. Let's do an age of, let's do 40. And then the name is, I don't know, Mr. Bean, Mr. Beans. I don't know why that would be anyone's name. But what we have here now is we have this raw we've selected. And then I have this set to JSON right here. And this is under the body tab right here. So in header, you could just come here and you're going to type in here content type, and it should auto format. And then as you type application/JSON, it should auto populate for you. So all you need is the post, the address, the header to be content type application JSON, and then your body, which is going to be your code coming on in, or your data coming on in. So we're going to go ahead and send this and see if it produces an error. So we're going to click this, and it says there was an error. Okay, that's awesome. Let's go and check and see what the error was. So I'm going to move this off screen. Come into here. It says it's running. So let's go ahead and try this one more time here, because I may have not restarted it. Sometimes you get into an issue of having that happen. So we're going to come in here again, post, and we see that a user has been added. So I forgot to reset my server. Once again, that was me live making a mistake, and those things happen. So now that the user has been added, we could come into our database. If you don't know how to get to here, you could always go to Query Tool, which is where I'm at. And let's come in here. We see we have ID number 5, we have age 40, and we have Mr. Beans, whoever the heck that is, right? So that's pretty awesome. Now we're able to post information to our database. So then if we could post and create something now, you know, what if we wanted to say, update something? So I'm going to come in here and once again, paste in. So I'll say update user. I think my computer is listening to me. I'm hitting save right here. And so I have this hits right here, which is, I was debugging it earlier. And I have this request params ID. Okay, so this should tell you I'm wanting to pull something from the URL. But then I'm also going to have an incoming JSON object, some data coming in I'm going to need. And so what we have right here is we have the update user info, and we want to set the name and age where the ID equals, 1, 2, and then 3. So we're pulling ID from here. So we have to pull that out from the URL specifically. But then the name and the age we know we're coming in a form of a JSON, and so insofar as the body content. So we're accessing those right here, and then we're just lining them up in this array where name equals name, age equals age, and where the ID is, whatever you provide in the URL. So now we're going to come in here, update user, app.put, and it knows what I want. And so you notice that this get and this put are very similar, just like the post and this get are similar, right? And that's fine if the addresses here are, they are what they are. But once again, it's the put, get, post. These things matter when it gets the information and it's like, oh, okay, now you want me to look for a specific record and change it. And this is going to be the ID you're providing to me to change said record. So let's come in here, shut down the server, start it up again. And so what I'm going to do is bring over Postman. I have this put. So I have nothing here in my, in here. I could probably do something like a content type, whatever, but I have the body, and I'm going to change the 4th thing in our database here. And what is the 4th thing? So let's go and change the 5th. Let's change the age of Mr. Beans right here, right? Let's go ahead and do that. And so let's go to 5. Let's change this to Mr. Bean. And actually, I don't know how old he is. I think he's a bit older than I think. So we're going to change it to 55. So we have put, the address, and then our raw JSON, and this should work. And we see user modified with ID 5. I'm going to move this off screen. We're going to do this. We see it's Mr. Bean 55, and then we obviously accessed it by the ID here, which is 5. Very small query, very short, small query. And then we just hooked it up right here. This is like really, 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 I don't want to say like, brain dead or whatever like that, but the small amount of code you have to write is pretty awesome in my book. So we want to do a delete user next. I'm going to bring all this in. Going to save so it formats, and everything is the same as well, right? Same flow in here. I've already explained what this is, and now we're just going to have the delete statement. From user info, where ID is whatever here. So let's go and delete number 5. And so what I'm going to do is kill the server, start it up again. Going to bring over Postman, delete. And you notice there's nothing in the body, nothing in the header, nothing here. It'll just work. I have it set to delete. And so let's go ahead and click this. And it says there's an error. Oh, that sucks. So let's go ahead and look at the error. And it says this isn't working. Why? Because we need to come in here, and I'm dumb and this happens. We need to come in and actually hook it up, because these things happen. It's really easy to put, was it the cart before the horse, as they say? So if you think you're kind of losing it, just make sure you either, if you've already connected to your database, right? Make sure you've saved your files, stopped and restarted your server, and then start going from there. Or you've also exported and imported the database queries. So we're coming in here now. And let's try this again. User deleted. Sweet. Hey, but they're right here. Well, let's go ahead and do this. And we see that this is now deleted. So now we've successfully done all of the basic CRUD operations on this one table, which I think is super cool, right? This is a easy, to a degree, right? I've seen a lot of complex APIs, but using Postman right here, feel free to stop and go back over these sections. We could test that with the web browser itself for these gets, but we could still come back in here. This is our, get all. We still get all the info coming on in. This is our get specific user here, which, works just fine. But also we have our put and our post and our delete. And this is a nice way for you to test your API that it's working at a, low level here without actual, real testing the code, to make sure that the data and correspondence is happening. So this is pretty cool. This is awesome. And what I'm going to do in the next section is build out either like a really small API, or not API, but a UI. And then we're going to connect to the API. And then we should be able to have our full stack experience going. And then I think that's it. So see you in the next section. All right. So in this section, what we're going to do is build out an admin panel. And so this is a way to take our API that we wrote and test it. Now, I showed you all about Postman and all that glorious stuff there, but sometimes when you have a product or a website, right, you don't want to have just Amazon or Walmart.com that just loads what the, you'd like the user to see, or maybe their shopping cart, right? But maybe the user put in an order and something went wrong, so you have to go back later and collect the data and see, how things are stored. So that's what we're going to do here to kind of wrap up the video, is just create a UI that uses the endpoints we've already created. You can see right here, I'm using Bootstrap, so all you need is an index file or index HTML file and an index file right here. And what I'm going to do to speed up time is, the issue with Bootstrap is typing it all out because there's a lot of boilerplate code. So all I am going to be doing is using a container. Then I'm going to be having rows, and then in each of those rows is an accordion. And those are the only three things I'm going to be using. So if you want to recreate this yourself or whatnot, it's really just those three things. So what I'm going to do first here is just copy this on in. And if, this was a different course or whatever, I may do this differently, but we've already been through the Bootstrap stuff and we kind of see how this works. So I'm going to go ahead and not do that. Come on in. And then close that off there. So now we just have like an XXL container in here. And so we could come back here. We see CRUD operations. All right. So the next thing I'm going to do is come on in to my other screen, which you can't see, for better or for worse, right? I'm going to come to the inside here, and I'm going to click Save. And we see that there's a row, which is just, standard. If you're using Bootstrap at all, you have the rows you have to use, right? And then I basically just went to the accordion page and I copied the accordion example they had, and then I came on in and changed some stuff up here. So I added a button inside of the or I added, this is part of the button that's in the header in and of itself, because you have to drop it down, right? I changed the text to get users, and then inside of there I have a button. This is what I'm going to click to be getting the data, and where I'm going to be putting that data, because I'm asking for it from my API, is I want to put it in this area. Now, are there better ways to probably do this? Set it up? Yes, but this is a very lo-fi example. So inside of this accordion, when we drop down, I want to click Get Data, and then below here, I want that data to be pulled on in. So that then makes us ask, how do we get that data? So since we're already at the bottom here, we have this script index.js coming in after our Bootstrap stuff here. Let's come on in and get the users. So one thing I'm going to do right here is I'm just going to go ahead and take the incoming argument here and just paste it on in. And this should be, I think it's not entirely necessary for that part. Let me double check on the other screen here. So I have this right here, and I'm pretty sure if the headers accept, let me just go ahead and remove this right here. And so what's going on is that I have this, I haven't finished off the squiggly brackets here, but I have this fetch. It's going to my local host, and this is my API I have set up when I run it. And so this method right here is get. This is part of the second argument coming on in that you could use. And it is, it's a quite useful thing, right? Because you want to tell it, because there'll be similar routes / users. And when our API gets a request, it's got to have some way to differentiate, okay, there's this forward users route. Is it a post, a put, a get? I don't know what it is, right? And so we're just declaring that right here. So let me come on in and don't think I need that right there. So we have that all saved up. So then now what we want to go ahead and do is come on down here to where the result is. And then we just want to get the result and just, put it out on the screen. So we have that right here, and let me double check. And this is the thing about doing these then and then a catch at the end. It gets a little cumbersome here. So let me go ahead and close this off. So now we have the data actually coming back. And then let me come down here, just write the catch, just so I have everything all formed out here. And we'll go ahead and log that out. That doesn't matter. So that should be good. So now what we're going to do is, get the data coming on in. So how are we going to end up doing that here? So what we want to do is get the area where we're going to print it out, which is this right here. We're just going to stick it in this paragraph tag. So we have to come in and get it. Const info UI. And then the get content area. So then the next thing we want to do is we do want to do this, which is right. It's seen my code from the other page, but what we want to do is clear it out every time. Otherwise, we're going to constantly be appending our data to this area and it will just look bad. So we'll want to clear it before we put some stuff there. So then we're going to come down into here, and then let's just do a old school for loop. And let me look at this, and I'm going to go ahead and chop this out. I just kind of wanted the rest of it up above. We're going to take info UI dot enter HTML plus equals, and then what we're going to do is just it's a lo-fi example, so that's fine. We're going to get the name, and then let's just go ahead and delete this on out. Give a little bit of space there. Yeah, and I think it is pretty close to what we want. So we have all of this right here. So when we click the button, we want to fetch the data, which is correct. And then what we want to go ahead and do after that is just simply get that data back here. And as we go through it, we want to, inside of that paragraph tag, just add this stuff, and we should be good. So let's go ahead and make sure this runs here. I always want to open up the dev tools to double check. So there's a missing paren somewhere in here. So let me double check this. So there goes that. Oh, that's weird. It brought in a requirement up above. That's really strange. Sometimes you get that with these autofills. So we're not using Lodash. You don't know. You need to know what that is. All right. So we have all this going on in here. We're going to click this. We have get data, and let's see if we blow this thing up. And now you see we're pulling from the database. This is the exact data that is in our database right here. Now I've been adding random stuff in here, testing it on out, random names, ages, IDs, stuff like that. But this is in fact what is being pulled from the database, which is super cool, right? Because now, hey, I want to get all the users or see all the kinds of, pizza I have in a table. I can now, click and, or if I wanted to start it over, right? See it all right in here in a somewhat neat and kind of orderly way. So that's pretty cool. But there's a lot of, other important things outside of, a get kind of function here. And so let's go ahead and explore those. And what I'm going to look at next, and it's really the same copying and pasting. What I'm going to do is just go through all the CRUD operations. So I'm going to go ahead and post the entire, post section in here. And every one of them looks like it's a lot, but like I said, it's a lot of boilerplate code, so I wouldn't worry about it. And plus my code is on GitHub, so you could always look that up too. So I'm going to come down here, I'm going to save this. We see we have this post users right here. A lot of boilerplate. It's nearly identical to what we have up above for the get. We've changed this to post users. But now we have, this post data button, which is what we're going to use to end up calling the API to send data to our database. But now we have some inputs that I've copied from Bootstrap as well. Just lifted these out, changed the IDs on some of these, kept some other stuff the same. But one thing you remember that get, I'm getting information from the database. So what am I going to post right here for the post content area? And that is, I want, just for this lo-fi kind of project here, I want the status. So I want to see, is it a 200, 400, 500? What is it that's coming back? And so that's the focus of here. So everything is the same as it was before. I just copied and pasted in 3 input sections. And then when I click this, it's hopefully going to give me a 200 or something like that back. So let's go ahead and build this out, in our code here. So let me go ahead and minimize that. So how do we do this? Well, we're going to come in here. We have the post button, which is what we're getting. So we want to get that button. And then when we click that button, we want to put an event listener on it. So let me actually come down there and close it out. Because there's so many squiggly brackets that you use, it kind of gets really annoying. And so to save time, I'm going to copy and paste these in from my other screen here. But let's look and analyze these. So I have these ID, name, and age, and where am I getting from? I have post ID, post name, and post age. So if I come back over here, we see post ID, post name, and then post, I didn't want to do that, post age. And that means all I'm doing is getting the values from these input areas. That's it. That's all I'm doing. So now that I have the values of all 3 of these secured, what I am going to do to, this is just a way I do it, is I got to make the JSON that I'm going to assemble together. So then I want to make some post data. And there's going to be an ID of post ID, which is, key value, right? And this is the value, obviously, because we're accessing the value right here. Name, post name, age is going to be post age. So now that we have that, what do we do next? Well, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and copy this, just because sometimes this gets a little hairy typing this out. And so I'm using this fetch, and as the second argument, just like above where I'm having the get, this is a post. But now there's some other things that we've added in here that you may think are, well, this is kind of interesting. And so I have the headers on here, and this is me just saying that the content that's coming in is going to be application JSON, because this is JSON, right? And then the body, which is how my API is going to unwrap it. It's not getting it through the URL, it's getting it through the payload. This is the form by which you would send this thing on up. So It looks like a lot, but it's a lot of copy and paste. So then we're going to come down here. I'm going to have this response here. And then what we want to do is const post response document.get element by ID, and then post content area. So we want to get that. And then since we have that area, we want to get the inner HTML, and we'll just let it autocomplete, then come on in and do response.status. So that's pretty cool. And so then we want to catch the error here. But instead of simply just console logging it out, what if we were to do this? We were to come into here and just log the error. That way we know that there's an error in here, down here, rather than having to go into the developer tools. That tells us a lot more information, right? So it looks like there's no issues over here. So let me go ahead and post some data. So let me do like something wild. So let me do like 40. Let me do, let me think of a name here. Kyle. I worked with Kyle once. He was a great guy. And then we're going to click this and let's see what happens. We get a 201. Well, that's cool. Let me bring this on over. And we see that Kyle is right here. But what if we, don't want to do that? We'll come up here and we see that Kyle was added to our database. So that's pretty neat. With every section though, rather than just put information up there, you're going to want to change something about the information as well. And so put is basically edit. You want to edit something in the database. And so I'm going to copy and paste in that information or that code right here. And you notice it looks insanely similar. We have our input boxes here. We have our put data, button, our label for our put user for the drop down. These are both very similar looking and they should be, right? So how are we going to do this? And it's very similar to what we did before. And as a matter of fact, what we can do essentially is, let me lower this down. We could just essentially copy and paste this all over again. And then we can modify it. Except, we'll go up here and do put. Our button is a put button. I know that because I've already coded this out. And then I have to come down here and change the name of what I'm getting. Put ID. The thing though that is interesting about the API is that for our put information, we're actually taking the information for the ID out of the URL. So we do have to change this URL a little bit, which could be a little weird, but there's an interesting way of doing it. And I'll show you. You could use these things called backticks. So we have these backticks here, and it allows us to dynamically put information in a string. If you've done stuff in Java or I think, Python, you could do similar stuff. There's similar ebbs and flows to working with strings, but if you want to have, you don't know what the value is until the last minute when the data is submitted, you come in here and do $, open and close squiggly bracket, and we could do post, or we could actually just do, let me switch this to just data right here, just so my code off the screen is matching what's on the screen. And we have this right here, which is, super cool. So now that I have all of this right here, let me come in and change this up. because I just have a put content area as denoted right here. Same thing as we did for the post. We're just changing a lot of stuff from post to put. As you notice, the application, the headers, so when it receives it on our API, it knows it's JSON so it doesn't blow up. And it knows it's getting information here, in this body. So now that we have this, let's go ahead and actually change this up. Actually, I should probably change the name of this. That's one thing about copying and pasting, right? I'm in control. This isn't a giant chunk of code, but always be careful as you're going through and doing this because it can come back to haunt you. So now that I have that set up, let's say I want to change something about Kyle. Say I want to change his age to 35. How would I do that? I come into here, and what is his ID? I know right here it's 40, so 40 should guarantee to hit him. And I want to change his age from, let's say, 25 to 35. Let's see if I did this correctly. I'm going to hit this. And let's see what happens. We see there's 25 right there, but something isn't quite working. So we have to ask ourselves, what is not getting pulled in? Did I make an uh-oh somewhere? And there's definitely a possibility of that. So we actually see that we did it right here. We have the put button, right? Copying and pasting error. So let's try this again. I think it was 40. And we want to change Kyle to 35. Let's try this now. It says post ID is not defined. So we're going to come back on over here. And we see, in fact, I did not update these yet. So now that these are all put, matching these right here, let's see how this runs. This is just a good example, too, of when this is how people code, right? These things happen. So now we get a 404 not found. Now, why is that? Let's come into here. And we have 40. We have 25, and then we have Kyle still. So it was not able to find what we wanted to, but this is a nice little hint. We have users 40. So what is that telling us? This is a really crappy URL. So if we come back into here, we're like, well, that doesn't work. That's really strange. But if we look, and I'm bringing this on over off screen, or from off screen, I should say. For put, we have to have a / right here, if you remember that. So we're going to come on in and add this / And let's try this again. We get a 200. Let's come up to here and see. Kyle is now 35 years old. If I wanted to do 45, I could come into here and do this. No errors back. And now you see that he's changed to be 45. So that's pretty cool. Now, for the last section here, what I'm going to do is do the deletion because, sometimes you just need to get rid of some stuff. So I'm going to come in once again. I'm going to copy and paste the code that's going to be used here. And as you notice, these are all color coordinated. I went through and changed those on out. And all we have here is an ID. That's because we don't need anything else. We just need to find something by an ID and remove it. So all we have is a single input here. Same stuff we've been seeing before. This input has a delete ID in here. We have the button, which we're going to be getting to do this delete action. That's where it's sitting right there. So let's go ahead and do a delete. So now that we've done the put, let me come up here and minimize this stuff here. Delete users. I'm going to do const, do that because it knows what I want. And then we're going to do a delete button here. And then all we want to do is get the delete value, right? The delete ID. And it knows what I want. So we have the const delete ID document get element by ID right here. And so it's coming on in and just getting, like I said, whatever value it is we've typed in here from this line. So now that we've captured it on line 85, we can now start, doing some of the stuff we've seen previously. And just to save some time, what I'm going to do is come on through here and essentially just copy and paste in, because we've seen this a million times already, the call. So you see, don't forget that / right here, right here. I'm move this on out because these are different ideas. I'm getting the delete from the input. I'm sticking it in the URL. And then when I get a response, I'm going to remove the console logs because I don't think we need them. We're giving it the method of delete. So we have an object coming in here telling it that it's a delete. When we get it back, we're just going to stick the status into the screen. And if there's an error, we're going to put that in the screen as well. So let's come up here. Let's get some data and let's get rid of Kyle. We don't have his ID, but I believe it was 40. So we have 40. So let's come in here and type 40 and then delete him. We get a 200. So this should be gone. We got rid of Kyle. And so this is a way you could create like an admin panel for your goods and services and stuff. And this is how you start making full stack websites. So if you have any questions, leave them down below and I'll try to get back to them. But like, share, subscribe, and I'll see y'all in the next video.